Well, International Women's Day celebrations come just ahead of the United Nations Annual Commission on the Status of Women. This year, the summit is, the theme of the summit is Women's Economic Empowerment in the Changing World. But how does this apply to Africa, where women make up more than half the population, but face a different set of challenges from their male counterparts, or rather their female counterparts in developed countries? Our UN correspondent Liling Tan speaks to UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed.
What are some of the prevalent challenges faced by women in Africa?
Access to education. It's the biggest barrier that we have, whichever way we look at it. Even if you manage to get that, then the other barriers that are in place are very cultural. It is a society where already it is difficult to get a job for the average person. And we just fall to the lowest run of the ladder.
How much correlation is there between poverty and gender disparity?
A huge correlation. I mean, for us, the whole issue of lack of access to your basic rights, to empower yourself, to do the things that you need to do, keep you below the poverty line. And I think that this is some of the challenges that we have, is that while we're saying that there is inherently extreme poverty across Africa and different. If you take the statistics and you look at the disaggregated data, it's worse where we come to see women and girls.
What kind of progress have you seen so far, and is that anywhere near enough?
Certainly, I think in the public space we need to do more, but all through the different strata of service. So in our sectors, for instance, to see more women in policy making, so that they can change the opportunities once it comes to the investments that are made in budgets. So the public space is important. Then I'd like to see many more in decision making in the private sector, so that they're encouraging other women to come into that space. Role models, we need so many more. There's many who struggle. And consciously, women, ask the question of where are those behind them and help give them a leg up, but push the men as well. I think often there's a blind spot, and you have to speak to that. As a former Minister of Environment, every delegation I received, if it was not one that didn't have gender parity, I would call them out. And in a nice way, but just to say, well, where are they? And they'd say, oh, that some of them are coming, or they haven't quite made it, or they're actually in the office. And I said, well, they need to be around the table talking to me, because that's decision making. They'd come back the next time, and in some cases I'd see more women. But I would ask, what's the position they hold now that you've got equal number here coming to see me? What actually do you do?
You talked about role models, and you talked about calling out delegations that don't have gender parity. I'm not going to ask you to call out nations that are lagging behind, but which countries in Africa do you think are setting good examples when it comes to gender parity and reaching as close to the SDG goals as they can?
I mean, the ones that I've most visibly worked with of recent have been Rwanda, but that has always been sort of our role model for how it should be done. But it really went beyond the statistics. I saw a president working with women and taking on advice and really utilizing the expertise around the table. So I think that has been very helpful. I've seen it in Kenya. I've seen it, well, in Liberia, of course, it's headed by our Mama Africa. And I think don't forget that. Often people look to see the man and what does the gender parity look like around the table and how they're utilizing it, but also for us women. Sometimes I've turned around in the team that I'm going down the corridor with and I'm thinking, oh, where are the women?
50-50 parity by 2030, I think that's the goal. Is it realistic?
I think it is, but we also need to realize the challenges that are there, because there are tensions in trying for this to happen. In countries who can barely meet the basic requirements of infrastructure and building nations, it becomes very difficult to look at some of the extra costs that come in. So I think that as we look to see how we can be more fit for purpose in the United Nations, is to help countries see those gaps and find the solutions in other partnerships to bring women into the workspace and to have empowerment. That we have to ask a family to make choices between a girl and a boy is not normal. But it's usually a circumstance they find themselves in, and if they have to make that choice, they have to make that choice. One child has to go through the door. We'd like all 2, 3, 4 children to go through the door and have those equal opportunities all the way through.
What, in your opinion, is the most important message you want to convey to the girls and women of Africa?
I think finding, first of all, the essential tool to begin that journey has to be education, and it can be done many different ways. Our mothers in Africa are just amazing women who, with whatever they have, feed their children, educate their children. And I think that's the most important first step, and never to underestimate the power of education, and take it at whatever level that you find it. And then utilize that. Look around you. What are the opportunities? And really focus on them, and do them well, no matter what they are. They are building steps to a greater future.
What about the boys and the men? What would you tell them?
Partnerships are important, and everyone's got a role to play in our society. Your home is not complete if you don't have a woman in there who has had as many opportunities, or equal opportunity as you have had, and that it's value added. I think you are less of a person if your partner hasn't been invested in and isn't realizing their full potentials. But I also have to say that we have to invest in boys as well. I mean, we have great challenges in Africa. We've left the youth behind, and they've found pastures that are not green, and that have caused anxiety and terror, and issues and challenges that we shouldn't have. And most of the burden of that, or the crisis of that, has fallen on the shoulders of girls and women. So I think it is all about getting it right for everyone, and that you're not leaving anyone behind. But I would say in particular our girls and women, because they are the group that's been left behind over and over again.